What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to Thought Process. My name is John Prado, and today I'm going to be talking about self-improvement and discipline. This will probably be a 4-part series or so. I'm going to try to break it into episodes of like 20, 30 minutes around that time. And we're just going to be focusing on different aspects of the same huge topic. And then in the end, we're going to come back to wrap everything together and talk about the importance of that in our lives and the lives of others. And basically, when talking about self-improvement and discipline, we'll talk a little bit about philosophy. So we'll talk about Stoicism. We'll talk a little bit about natural law. We'll also talk about the psychological effects of discipline and the psychological alignment of what your thoughts should be when you're going through hardships and adversities as a means to have you become a better person or have more potential in this life. And you'll understand everything that I'm saying a little bit. So just hang with me here. And this one's specifically about discipline. It's probably going to run me about 25 minutes long, so watch it in parts if you have to, but it's very important because it's going to lay the foundation and the fundamentals for the entirety of the argument itself, so you definitely don't want to miss out. And also, all of my sources are going to be in the description. All of them are going to be timestamped, and also I've split the video into different chapters if you want to skip around to different parts that you find important or that you want to listen to more closely. And before we get straight into the topic, into the first topic or in the first part, I actually wanted to mention a couple of ideas that were present to me before the making of this video, and after a little bit after the writing of the script, which actually made me revise the message. So first was there's this man called Dr. Shree, and I heard one of his talks. I go to school in Nashville, and he had a talk there in a Catholic church, and he basically. The talk had nothing to do with self-improvement, actually, but he went on a little rant about, not that it's a bad thing, I'm just saying that he did, about this idea of self-improvement and hustle culture and the culture of looking within. So he was basically talking about how there was this obsession with the self in the idea of self-improvement and the idea of developing resilience or becoming the best version of yourself. And actually, the point was very well taken. This is very true, especially for a lot of people who are seeking to do things or want things to provide things better for themselves. So the example would be somebody working out for purely aesthetic purposes to pick up girls or something. But I also want to defend the point that I'm going to make here, and this is going to be very important because by Christ we are all called into a life of servitude. And I think that is very important. And we're going to talk about the intentions of self-improvement. And it's very important that we look at self-improvement in this very specific way, which is we're not just self-improving for the self. There is a very selfish part of self-improvement, which is the prioritization of yourself over others a lot of times. But there's also there's this clash with the calling to servitude of Christ to the lives of each and every one of us. But so this is why it's important for us to view it this way. We have to understand that self-improvement is going to prioritize what we need to grow on, and it is our responsibility to work on ourselves to be the best version that we can be. But that doesn't necessarily mean that everything that we do is in a selfish way. So, for example, there's a difference between you choosing to go to a party with a friend or you choosing to have an important conversation because your friend is going through something complicated. One is just going to have fun with your friend, and the other one, your friend actually needs you. So you're serving your friend by giving up your time and actually doing something that is important to them. So if someone actually needs you because they're going through a tough phase, that is serving a friend. So quick interruption here to clarify a little bit more the contrast between when an action is necessary for others and when an action is desirable by others, or when an action is necessary for yourself or when an action is desired by you. So self-prioritization is, even though we are called to a life of servitude, as I've explained, is not necessarily a bad thing. So that's why I was explaining the difference of you serving your friend and you just doing something that your friend would like to do with you. So basically the dichotomy here is if you know that you have to do something and your friend actually wants you to do something else, what are you going to prioritize? What you need to do or what your friend wants you to do? And conversely, the same thing. If you really want to do something, but your friend needs you to do something, are you going to pick serving yourself or serving your friend? Serving yourself in the desire or serving your friend in the necessity? So that's basically the dilemma of servitude, basically in self-giving and self-serving, which is it's not bad to do either of those.
in the abstract or in the open, in a vacuum, right? But instead in the context. There are a lot of things that you're going to need to do that you're going to have to know how to prioritize. So it's not wrong to self-prioritize and self-improve, but when it starts getting in the way, that being when you start doing that which you desire instead of that which you need to do, when you be it either referring to you or to your friends, that's when the discernment of self-improvement kind of comes into, should I really work on self-improvement here, or should I serve my friends? That's the real question of servitude.
And I would argue that it is your responsibility to be in the best version of yourself in order to be able to serve others. So there's this view or intention with self-improvement, which is I am going to become the best version of myself, not because of my own pure selfish interests, but instead to serve my community, to serve my children if you have a family, or my wife or husband, or my God even. So it's this sense of self-improvement that we're going to be talking about. Self-improvement is improvement in every aspect of life, be it physical, be it spiritual, and be it mental. And through spiritual self-improvement and through maturity of spirit and of faith, we're actually going to get into a place of thought or a field of thought where it's going to transcend the self. And you're going to understand the calling of servitude that we all have according to Christ. And then by that self-improvement, you're going to be better able to serve everybody that matters to you, and more accurately do that which Christ has reserved for you. So maybe this was a very complicated way to begin the episode, or to start the channel, but maybe you'll get a sense of what the conversations and argumentations and deliberations in this place are going to be like. We're about to get into actually what the first point, which is what it means to have discipline, what is discipline, and why discipline is important to actually starting to self-improve. So stay tuned. I'll pause the water. So the first problem we're actually going to talk about is, I think, is an overarching theme in today's society, especially in this generation, around my age, the teens of this generation as well, which is people tend to be extremely emotionally weak. They surrender to their emotions at the first temptation of it, and they use their emotions and feelings as fundaments for actions and reactions. And this can actually be extremely detrimental to any action that they have or any action that they make towards a certain problem or a certain adversity. And it is important that in order to achieve the appropriate place for improvement, we have to come to terms with our emotions and our emotional reactions and our emotional triggers. And the one who actually said it best was Marcus Aurelius, famous Stoic, the last good emperor of Rome during the good times. He said, "In every contingency, keep your mind's eye on those who had the same experiences before and reacted with vexation, disbelief, or complaint." So where are they now? Nowhere. And so what he's basically saying here is for people who reacted in a bad way to bad situations, that being like complaining or pouting or just being like giving into their emotions, even crying a lot of times, they actually got nowhere, because solutions to problems aren't found in complaints. Solutions to problems are found in actions, and good sober actions only come through rationality, which only comes through the transcendence of emotions. Now, I'm not saying that emotions are bad, and I know you've heard this a lot before, especially from people who preach the same message that I'm preaching now, but using emotions as a guidance or a gateway to action may actually be extremely dangerous and very counterproductive. So this is when you see people, for example, who are mad at someone else, they go and punch the person, and it just actually escalates the problem to a whole different level where it was actually never going to get to if you never did that action. So that's the importance of controlling emotions. And this is exactly where we're going to get into the concept of discipline. Discipline is actually a concept that has multiple sides to it. The first one that we're going to talk about is the application of it in society as a whole. And then we're going to talk about a little bit of different scenarios, especially the self-application of discipline. So by dictionary definition, discipline is the practice of training people to obey rules or a code of behavior. And philosophically speaking, it's any action or inaction that is regulated to be in accordance with a particular system of governance. And psychologically, it can also be mostly linked to the idea of mindfulness, which we're going to get to in a second. And then we'll also explain the dichotomy between mindfulness and emotion suppression, which is a very famous, but actually infamous way of dealing with emotions. But as you can see in both the dictionary definition and the philosophical definition, there are actually two components. There's the component of the governing body or the master, or whoever's in control. And then there's the component of the subordinates. So a good example of this would be in an army. So the draftees or the people who are training, they're the subordinates to the generals or to the people who are leading the army. And then because of that, they are conditioned by the generals to act in the correct way according to the moral code of the people in control. And when talking about self-improvement, we actually apply this discipline to self, and this is what would be known as self-discipline. And that is defined as the ability to control one's feelings and overcome one's weaknesses, the ability to pursue what one thinks is right despite temptations to abandon it. And then a quick analysis of this actually reveals the two different components that we've talked about previously in those two other definitions, but inside of you, so inside the self. Again, the ability to control one's feelings and overcome one's weaknesses, to pursue what one thinks is right despite temptations to abandon it. So when talking about feelings, your feelings are going, because they're easily malleable and easily controllable and manipulated by situations, they're going to be telling you to do things that are not necessarily correct according to your rationality. So the governing body in this example is your rationality, your reasoning, your ability to discernment. And then the subordinates of those are going to be your feelings. And the only way that you're going to be able to make a good decision is if you are in control of your feelings. And some people are going to talk about how, like, hunches or, oh, I just had the feeling that I had to do this, and then it works out in the end. Feelings can be good. Look, there are a lot of different situations where you can use feelings, especially if you're in a place of like extreme comfort. And later on, when we talk about Stoicism, we're going to talk about that it's not about not feeling things or not having feelings. It's more about controlling them. So as I've been saying, but basically, discipline leads to the subordinates into change of habits. And the subordinates in this sense are going to be your feelings. And the change of habits are going to be according to the moral code of the master or of the government, which are of the body of governance, which is going in this case to be your rationality and your reason. So self-discipline declares you, as in your rational thinking, to be the leader, the government, the master, and the ruler, and your feelings, your emotional reactions, and temptations to be its subordinates. Self-discipline is a doctrine which leads us to train our emotions into submission to our rationality. Rationality is what's going to guide us to progress and to improvement, for it knows much better than mere emotions what are the best actions to be taken in any given moment. So, step one. Discipline. It's the control of feelings and not surrendering to the temptations of whatever it is you're feeling like doing, and instead surrendering to rational decisions and not rational, wise discernment. Now, of course, this challenges us to deal with our problems head on, and this is where we're going to get to the psychological aspects of it. We're not supposed to avoid or dodge emotions. We're supposed to actually deal with them and contemplate about them and face them in order to achieve or reach a rational conclusion of an action that should be taken to solve it. So psychologically speaking, this idea is known as mindfulness. So different from the infamous emotion suppression, which refers to dealing with emotions by burying them or avoiding them, mindfulness has been defined as paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. Interestingly enough, though, both strategies have actually shown to have some good effects on the brain, both emotion suppression and mindfulness. So suppressing emotions appears to reduce negative memories, whether you do that consciously or unconsciously. And mindfulness was shown to have significant efficacy in reducing relapse and recurrence of major depression. But the problem with emotion suppression, so emotion suppression isn't fully bad, which is what people usually think. The problem with emotion suppression is that it takes mental effort. It takes effort. You have to have enough cognitive resources to do that, according to the study that's posted there now. So it actually ends up having a bigger net negative effect to your brain or to your mental health when you come to avoiding or trying to bury emotions. Instead, you're supposed to face them, which is what mindfulness promotes. Mindfulness, according to Murakami here, doesn't present that risk, and it also reduces stress-related indices and stress symptoms while improving our ability to tolerate and cope with future negative emotional states. So it doesn't only help you in that one specific situation, but it also builds on itself the more that you do it, making you more resilient to future adversities in the emotional sense. As you apply it more to your life, you become more resilient to adversities of life. And as the study concludes, contrary to emotion suppression, mindfulness emphasizes an increasing awareness and full acceptance of all emotional experiences, regardless of apparent valence, intensity, or perceived utility. It is quite difficult for human beings to suppress feelings, given that affective changes per se are inherent and spontaneous, such that acceptance of one's own emotion should help one to stop endless and inefficient efforts to avoid emotional experiences. In fact, mindfulness increases parasympathetic nervous system activity and, in essence, calms down systemic arousal and thereby promotes therapeutic effects on psychopathological disorders. So, the best way, psychologically speaking, for one to deal with adversity would not be to avoid emotions and experiences, but instead to accept the outcomes and contemplate, thinking of the best action to be taken, rationally speaking, in order to deal with or revert, if possible, the situation. Now, this strategy, by actually decreasing overall impact on both expected and unexpected events on your mind, allows for maximum mental clarity when reacting or when deciding things, and that also minimizes the impairment that emotions have on rationality. Now, the added detail to this behavior is that it may take a little bit of time to accept things, which is true, and this is going to come depending on the gravity of the situation or the adversity that you're facing, but the end goal remains the same. We're still going to be susceptible to emotions to a certain extent. The goal here would be to minimize the amount of time and the gravity of the effect that emotions have on your decisions. So, like, if you lose a pet or something, it's not like you're supposed to be like, okay, I mean, nice. Of course, you're going to be sad. Like, we're not robots. We can't deny emotions and humanity. It's what makes us human. But it is of our duty to be able to limit and tightly control the emotions as quickly as possible to be able to make a rational conclusion of how to move on or take a constructive action on how to get away from the problem and move forward. So. But in these cases, this is probably where you're going to need to take some time to fume or to let out some mental junk. And some things that you could do to ease up the mental pressure is a lot of things related to nature. So just going outside and interacting with nature as a whole helps you mentally speaking. But practicing a sport, doing more healthy activities also helps you. Listening to music can also help cope. If you sing or if you play instruments, that helps in massive ways. I used to do that a lot in high school. Playing guitar has always been a safe haven. But the thing is, you can't use it as a way to distract yourself from the problem. You're using it as an emotional cope, so you're using it to relate to you, but you're also thinking about the problem and contemplating about the best ways of being able to get away from it, or to deal with it, or to overcome it. So it's not avoiding it; it's thinking about it, but with some emotional help in the back. And this is when we get to complaining. Complaining is a whole problem within itself because it doesn't actually solve anything. And while there are a couple of studies that argue that it actually helps de-stress a little bit and helps release some energy or some negative energy and helps the mental health of the complainer, it actually ends up having a worse side effect on the environment itself and on the people around you. So, and that comes back to bite the person or the complainer in the heel, because it actually ends up having a negative effect on him or on her, or on the complainer, and that actually ends up having a greater negative effect on the brain and on the mental health of the person. And not only that, it's not only bad for the complainer, but it also worsens everybody else's mood. So it's definitely not good in any sense. So the best action to take when heated is for you to remove yourself from the situation if possible. And if not, then you're going to have to practice resilience. And again, it's going to get better over time. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. So yeah, and actually when we talk about complaining and talking about just having a negative view of the problem in a lot of senses, it actually ends up being like a feedback loop into itself that causes more negative energy. So complaining actually begets complaining, and negativity begets negativity, because it never actually solves the problem. What's going to solve the problem is action. Action is the solution to problems. I've said this before, and it's actually become a trend nowadays. So I actually went to a shop nearby here, and I went to park beside a guy, and I pulled in really tight to the right. So I almost hit the guy, and then I was going to go back to kind of adjust my parking. And he got out of the car, and he was fuming, and he alleged that I hit his mirror. So I went down, like I came out of the car, and I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry for hitting your mirror." But when we checked the mirror, there was no damage, and I didn't feel the car move in any sense. So I checked my mirror, we checked his mirror. There was no damage. I didn't hit the car, and the guy started complaining instantly, and he was yelling at me, and he was making this whole fuss, and everybody around was looking at us, and I was just sitting there, and I look at him after he's done complaining, and I'm like, okay, what do you want to do? Or how do we solve this? Because there's no damage, like there's nothing that I can do. What's your plan? Since you're here so like crazy and emotional about this problem, I want to know what it is that you want to do to solve the problem. And he couldn't say anything. He didn't say anything because he hadn't thought about that, because he was busy wasting his energy and wasting his time and wasting his mind on complaining. He wanted to rant about the problems. He wanted to let his emotions out. He was letting that emotion get to him. And then when it came to solving the problem, which is exactly what was going to bring him mental peace, he actually had no response. So that's the importance of action. When we take rational actions, we actually come to the solutions of our problems. And unlike complaining, that's actually going to solve our mental dissonance. Complaining is just going to add to it, and it's going to make you, first of all, it's going to make you look like a clown, and second of all, it's going to stress everybody around you like it did me. But we are to look for answers, for progress, for solutions, and complaining isn't going to bring that. So take that into your mind, digest it, understand it, and keep it close to your heart every time that you come across a situation of adversity. Remember that. So if you remove yourself from society in order to think, to come to terms with your emotions by retreating to the Acropolis that is your mind, you're going to be able to clear up a lot better and a lot easier, and be able to surrender to your rationalities instead of to your feelings. Now, you might be asking, and this is when some smart person in the comment goes, well, isn't removing yourself from society because you're heated also an action based on emotions or on the things that you're feeling? No, because it's something that you're planning and thinking about as a default reaction to you realizing that you were impaired by emotions. So the difference is here, it's very important that we actually dichotomize this well. So the first action is guided by fervent emotions. The second one is an action guided by sobriety and realizing that your mind is being impaired by emotions. Thus, it is a conscious and rational decision, usually made beforehand, on how to properly deal with the situation. Now, it's important to understand, and I've talked about this before, but I'm going to say it again. It's important to understand that these reactions or these copes and mechanisms are temporary. We want to use these ways of coping to permanently increase our resilience over time and our mental fortitude. We don't want to ever stay static. So it's like the person saying that, oh, I'm going to work on myself and I'm going to stop being so mad. And then every single time that a situation arises, you are the same way. We don't want that. We want progress. That's the whole idea behind discipline and self-improvement. So learn how to deal with situations, and then as situations come, start preparing yourself better and start actually genuinely trying to deal with the situation. Remove yourself from society. Remove yourself from the people who are making you annoyed. Let go of that which is causing you stress, and go contemplate, go think about how you can actually come to terms with those emotions. And by that, you'll find a better understanding of who you are, and you're actually going to be able to better deal with the situations in the future. The whole idea of mindfulness, the whole psychological studies behind this, that is exactly what it's pointing to. So this actually introduces the most important concepts in the argument. So mastery over our emotions as a means to sobriety of decision is known as discipline, which is very important for self-improvement. And emotional indifference to uncontrollable or unforeseen events is the idea of Stoicism, or the philosophy of Stoicism. And that's the main philosophical branch that fosters as its end goal the facing of hardships without complaints. And this is exactly what we're going to get to, what we're going to get into in the next part of this video. But basically, a quick summary here is that Stoicism is actually going to present you with ways of dealing with life by restructuring our value hierarchy. So it's going to say that these problems that we all suffer with, and these things that actually present a lot of problems in our lives nowadays aren't actually that important, especially when you look at it from a philosophical point of view and a virtuous point of view. So it preaches a lot on the importance of virtue virtue, wisdom, and morality. And so in the next episode, we're going to talk about the philosophy itself. We're going to talk about the history. We're going to talk about the founders and the important characters. So thank you very much for watching. We're going to get into episode 2 very soon. So first video, it's done now. I think it turned out pretty good. You guys are going to let me know. I was actually very indecisive about this being the topic of the first video because I wanted to initially talk about something more philosophical or something more biblical. And I guess we will get into that in the next couple of parts. But as a starter, I was like, is this really going to hit home, you know? So I was kind of looking for confirmation of that. I was kind of praying a little bit. And simultaneously, I was doing a Bible study in the church nearby here. And we were studying Philippians. It was a Bible study for college students. And Philippians doesn't really talk much about self-discipline or discipline at all. So it really had nothing to do with what I was recording. But I had just recorded the video, and the next day I went to the Bible study, right? And then at the end of the Bible study, the dude that was leading the Bible study, he connects Philippians 3 to a verse in 1 Corinthians 9. And so we kind of went with our Bibles to 1 Corinthians 9, right? As soon as I get there, we got the topic header, right? The need for self-discipline. And I was like, no chance, bro. And then it reads, 1 Corinthians 9:24. Do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Therefore, I do not run like someone running aimlessly. I do not fight like a boxer beating the air. No, I strike a blow to my body and make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. And it's named the need for self-discipline. So, I mean, I don't know what to say. That's a heck of a coincidence if it is one, which it's not. So, a little bit more insight on how I got to having this be my first video, but I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, drop a like, share the video with your friends. If you like the message, if you were impacted by it in any way, go ahead and share it to whoever you'd like. But thank you for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.